Patchwork Heart Ministry and Fiat Ministry Network present the Discover Your Mission series.
Now, I had been brought up without any prayer, without Bible, without church, nothing of that kind. And so when my father died, I became suicidally depressed. I had no desire to live. And yet, by the grace of God, whenever I got to the point of actually taking my life, I always had this interior conviction that if I took my life, I would simply find it again on the other side, and it would be permanent misery.
But it wasn't until I became a wife and a mother, and I began to try and pass my faith on to my children, that I realized that everything I knew about Jesus was memorized doctrine.
I was a good man, I was a good father, I was instilling the sacraments into my family. I was definitely not intentional. I was stuck broke in my faith.
But what kind of strength did he have? Jackie did not just have a strength of body or baseball skill. He had a strength inside of his spirit, a courageous meekness that empowered him to play the game.
And I tell him what is going on with me, and he's like, oh, okay. And I'm like, no, I think this is like some sort of miracle, dude. And he's like, okay, of course, but I'll believe it when I see it. Honey, you've been trying to quit, and you've been saying this and saying that, and I'm his big line to me is, you shouldn't say things, because I never follow through on them. And so this was week after week, month after month. He is looking at me like, this is a miracle. There is no way that you, on your own, could have done this.
So we are called to sing. All of us are called to sing. All of us are called to express ourselves and join our voice into the unity of the church. Often with my choirs, I ask them to listen to each other, to listen to the sound that they make together as one. That's what we're aiming for. Through the harmony or unison, we're aiming for a one sound.
You need to decide, what are you going to participate in? Are you going to participate in the historic Christian idea of the altar of sacrifice, which is in the Eucharist, or not?
Welcome to the Sowing Hope podcast. This is a show all about implanting hope in our hearts. I'm Bill Snyder, joined by my friend Ann DeSantis. We're glad you're here for our uplifting conversation about faith and how it sustains our hearts through all the seasons of life. Thanks for walking with us. And good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Sowing Hope podcast. I'm Bill Snyder. It's great to be with you this evening, wherever you are. I know it's snowy here in Wisconsin and on the East Coast, so it's snowy everywhere, I think, but Florida these days. I even saw some snow in Dallas, Texas, earlier on the news. So, folks, welcome to a very snowy episode of Sowing Hope. And as always, I'm joined by my friend Ann DeSantis. How are you in snowy Philadelphia?
So a Catholic apologist, and happy to say also that his book called Fragments is has been recently one of the #1 Amazon hot releases in Christian apologetics and the Christian allegory category. So thank you so much, Peter, for joining us on Sowing Hope.
Oh, it's great to be here, Ann. Bill, it's great to speak with you. Thank you for that kind introduction.
Yeah, it's great to have you.
Yes. How are you doing? I know now you're a family man. You're married to your wife and have a young son. I love the photo that we used for the ad for this particular podcast of you and your son
Yep.
sitting together. And I'm sure that he's keeping you very busy.
Yes, he's keeping us busy. I can add to the snowy persons registry as well. We got hit with the big one earlier this week on the East Coast here, and he's discovering snow for the first time. So lots to keep busy with.
That's right. And if my memory serves me correctly, forgive me that I don't remember exactly how old he is, but I know it's somewhere around, is it 15 to 18 months?
Yeah, good memory. He just passed 18 months. So.
Okay. I knew it was somewhere in that, around that age. I love that age so much.
I don't have much to compare to, but yeah, it's really, it's magical. Every day is a new word, and he definitely keeps us on our feet.
So much fun. Now we have a lot to talk about in terms of your faith story. And part of what we do on Sowing Hope is always start out with the faith journeys of the people who are on the show. So please do share with us wherever you want to start about your own journey in faith.
Sure. I think that my faith journey is characterized probably most of all by just sort of being ordinary, in the sense that you read about some of the great Catholic apologists, and they have these great road to Damascus experiences. They have these great moments of conversion where they come over to the faith. And with me, I was very blessed to have a very tight knit Catholic family. I was raised in the church with all the sacraments, and I was very lucky in that regard. But I think that sort of the real action in my faith journey really happened when it came time, as I got a little older and started to realize, is this something that I'm just born into, or is it something that I want to take ownership of, and I want to really self-affirm what it is that I believe. And so that's kind of become one of the, I think, things that kind of motivates my apologetics work today, especially addressed toward people like myself that may be cradle Christians, cradle Catholics, because I see, there's an ordinariness about that experience, but in that ordinariness, I think there's an urgency that's not always acknowledged. I think that there's a sort of complacency that needs to be defeated when you're born into a faith, and you're growing up, remaining in that faith. I think you really do need to take it upon yourself to make sure that it's not just the faith of your parents, it's not just the faith of your family. And so for me, that was, I think, sort of the struggle that I experienced. Or it wasn't a struggle, but just that was the challenge that I had to rise to in my faith journey. And I think it's something that's shared by the vast majority of people in our church who are born into the faith.
Yes, absolutely. And I have to say, I do admire your faith. And I know you're very humble about the way you just described that, because you're right. We do have to recognize the gift of what we've been given. But I have to mention to our listeners here who don't know you personally and don't know your mission, is that you are a millennial, and that many times people in your age category are not that engaged, especially when it comes to the Catholic faith. I wondered if you could talk about that a little bit too. I'm sure that you have some contacts and friends of yours who are not engaged in religion.
It's absolutely true. And I think, the conventional thinking is that it's a trend that only is going to accelerate, as we plow ahead, and there are so many influences that pervade that are, I think, detrimental to, a healthy faith growth, on the part of everyone. I definitely see that. And I mean, now being a parent, I take it upon myself to play a pivotal role in, another person's faith formation. It's a very serious thing that my wife and I have long anticipated and planned for, and are sort of, making up as we go, but implementing a very, conscious set of ideas. But that definitely has been what motivates me to, be a little bit more open about my own faith, my own experiences. It certainly motivated me to put pen to paper when it came to, deploying my writing abilities for God, is just that to the extent that we're all called to be witnesses, there's a lot of times when we're witnesses in ways that we don't even intend. It's not just what we say, but also just who we are. If I can be a witness merely by being someone of my age group to the people that I'm around, that alone, I think there's some value to that on top of whatever else I might do or say. So it's definitely something that I take seriously, and something that I hope, we'll see a change in terms of, spirituality.
Yeah, very well said, because it is a true fact. I think that we hear the term nuns, and I'm sure you've heard of that term before, NONES, and we've talked about it before on Sowing Hope and some of our other shows, that the nuns are usually younger people, young adults, and maybe in your age category, who don't affiliate with a religion of any sort. Maybe they were Catholics, but now they don't affiliate with any religion. So I just think it's a really wonderful and amazing thing that you have really taken your faith upon yourself and said, you know what, not only do I want to practice it, but I'm going to go a step further. I want to write about it. I want to evangelize. I want to be an apologist. So tell us more on that end, because the fact that you are doing apologist work, I think, is also a really wonderful thing.
Yeah, I think that, on one level or another, really every member of the faithful is called to evangelize in whatever small sphere they find themselves in. And, the approach I usually take is one that I call, a fancy term for it, but pardon me, because I'm also an attorney, graduated evangelism, which is basically looking at every relationship I have in my life and deciding what is the most appropriate, effective, and realistic context in which I can, in a small or large way, evangelize as to, this person or this set of people in this relationship. And so I call it graduated, in the sense that depending on how close you are to a person, depending on what the situation is, that will determine, I think, sort of the way in which, you would, again, in a large or small way, sort of move the needle toward God, and this could be as simple as people you walk past on the street. You don't interact with them at all. You don't know who they are. Just by being a kind person without any explicit involvement of, Christian doctrine or Christian nomenclature, just by being a joyous person, a person walking in the image of Christ, that alone, that small bit alone could be, impactful for people that you come across. Same with people that you might, you have work relationships. You work with somebody, and obviously, when you're doing a important work project or whatever, you're not going to necessarily go on into a sermon. Just by being, possessing qualities like humility, forgiveness, mercy, for people that are subordinate to you or people that are, superior to you, just exhibiting Christian virtues, that alone, that is a way of evangelizing as well. And if you take it a step even further up the ladder, as to people that you're a little bit more intimate with, friendly with, certain friendships may lend themselves to a little bit more honest conversation. Maybe those moments open up where you can have those conversations about God, or if not God, then at least about the meaning of life and about how we should be, spending our time, devoting ourselves. And then, of course, I think the very top of the pyramid is your family, the people that, you are, under the same roof with. And as to those people, that's where I think the most explicit, the most intensified evangelism will take place, as with your spouse or your siblings, jointly developing your relationship with God. And in the case of parents, certainly as to your kids, a little bit more of a teaching or tutorial type relationship, leading them toward God. So no matter what your relationship is with any person in your life, there's always some way in which you can evangelize in some big or small way. That's what I find.
Yeah, perfectly stated. And you're doing a great job, because you are balancing a lot too. I mean, let's face it, you're an attorney, as you said. I know you live in New York, and I think you're practicing in New York City, if I'm correct.
Correct. Although not with the pandemic, but yes, usually.
Okay, yeah. So you're doing so much. I mean, you're married, you have a young son, and you were raised in a Catholic home. But somewhere along the way, something happened to you. I don't know whether you want to share on that, but something tapped on your shoulder and said, uh, my faith means even more than I can express. I want to go a step further in being a Catholic who really and truly expresses my love of God in everything that I do. Was there some kind of a moment for you or a time frame in your life that occurred?
I think it happened probably around college, which is when so much change and so much, personal development happens for all of us. College is certainly the time where most people get to, and they really want to understand what the world's about, what they should be doing, what direction their life should be going in. And for someone like me, who was very academically focused, cerebral, whatever, I was also trying to put pieces together. I was taking philosophy courses and so forth. I'm a firm believer in looking at the talents that you're given, the skill sets that you have, the things that interest you, that you like, and using those breadcrumbs to follow where you think God wants you to go, and using those as clues as to how you can best serve God. And so, as I'm thinking about all that, I come into contact. I'm very blessed to have the opportunity to learn under a very highly esteemed philosopher, Jesuit priest at Georgetown University, which is a Catholic school, who basically I take a bunch of classes with him over the 4 years that I'm there, and he basically teaches me that there's a very satisfying answer to, for someone who's sort of intellectually focused and looking for answers within the rubric of Christian doctrine. You'll find satisfactory answers. There's a full, complete harmony between faith and reason, and the stuff I learned under him, sort of, I think, crystallized my commitment to wanting to devote my skills, which has been writing and communication and thinking and stuff like that, toward God, and sort of through a lot of twists and turns, but eventually, led me to publish this book, and I'll do more writing on this subject as well in the future, I'm sure. Basically, just wanting to, lend my voice to this chorus of folks down the millennia who have been sort of defending the precepts of our faith, exploring the concepts like God's existence and so forth. And so that was probably the inflection point for me.
Yeah, so well said. I like that book, Fragments. You've done a great job, and you sent it to me. And you were also a guest on Journeys in Faith on Fiat Ministry Network, and it was a great show. And so I got to know you a little bit there. And so it's a blessing for us here with Bill Snyder and Patchwork Heart Ministry that you're here to talk more, because every interview you get to know the person a little bit more.
Yeah, for sure.
Is that right, Bill?
Yes, definitely. Peter, I'm very impressed with a lot of the things you're sharing with our audience, and so thank you, first of all, for stepping out. And I absolutely love how you said that absolutely every person you come in contact with, you can evangelize in some way. And I just think that is a very insightful thing, because oftentimes we as Catholics sit back and we think, oh, I only can evangelize in the four walls of my parish. Oh, I can only evangelize in my family. Oh, I can only... No. Even the person on the bus sitting next to you, you can evangelize. And so I just really, 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 think that's very insightful. And so thank you for sharing that, and thank you for sharing your journey. Your work too. That has to be some difficult stuff. In order to balance your, being a lawyer and practicing law, and also living your faith too, because there's probably tons of challenges in that field as well. I mean, I think every field has its challenges to be able to go and live your faith in, but certainly law and being a lawyer certainly does.
Absolutely does. It's true that, if you read the Gospels, even, I think Jesus is railing against lawyers. So it's not an easy profession, even from scriptural point of view. But it is. I mean, that again dovetails with what I was saying. Just as you can evangelize pretty much anyone that crosses your path, you can also evangelize in pretty much any vocation or situation that you find yourself in by leveraging the opportunities and the skills that you hone, in that experience. And so that's another reason why, I think, and this is something that Ann and I discussed, I guess last month when I was on her other program. God sort of just comes at you from every direction. God's accessible in virtually every way. You'd have to try hard not to find God in a certain activity or in a certain context. And so there's really no one right answer as to how best to connect with God, as to how best to have God work through you. It's really, it's perfectly fine to take your cues by what interests you, what you enjoy, and then, let God's work follow from that. And so I think that's a good thing for all of us, because it means that there's no wrong answer. We can do, we can pursue everything we love, and no matter what that is, chances are there's going to be a way that we can serve God effectively in that role.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing too that fits nicely with that is the understanding that God created you with your desires and with your talents and with your gifts and with your interests, right? So just like you said, you can find, and you can evangelize in any circumstance, in any profession. Well, God put those interests on your heart. If you want to be a lawyer, God needs great Christian lawyers. If you want to be a scientist, God needs great, disciple people who are scientists. He needs, disciples in every walk of life, because if we don't have, that discipleship in that area, then you could say, well, that's an area that, God doesn't want to be involved in, and that's not true. God wants to be involved in every aspect of our lives and in every aspect of each and every part of our society, so that's wonderful. And, also, glorifying whatever you are doing, for God is also super important, right? Taking the talents, the gifts, the interests, and saying, God, I'm going to serve you doing this. One of the organizations I used to work for, just to kind of talk about them a little bit, was Sports Faith International. And what they do is they take Catholic athletes or Christian athletes, and they give them a platform to say, yes, I'm Christian, yes, I'm Catholic, and they induct them in the Hall of Fame. They have their own Hall of Fame, and they induct them in this Hall of Fame, because they're living their faith and excel at sport. And so here they are. Some of them, like Vince Lombardi, is in this Hall of Fame. And so it's so good to hear you reinforce that. You reinforce that it doesn't matter what walk of life it's. If you can glorify God in it, you're doing wonderful things.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. Amen. And for me, listening to the two of you talk, it's just very encouraging to see people in the 30s and 20s age bracket, I would say millennial and younger, to be on fire for their faith. And both you, Peter, and even Bill, right? I have to say that, Bill, to you too, that it's just so wonderful to see this, because I'm older. I'm not a baby boomer. I'm somewhere in between, but but it is really a joy for us in my age group to see younger people who are really taking their faith as a really important aspect of everything that they do. And now that led you to become an author too. And you're the author of the book Fragments. And as I said, it is on Amazon, and I'm going to suggest to our listeners to go and check it out. I love it myself. Tell us about how that came to be and what it's about.
So, I guess following college, I've been doing a lot of writing on the side, and Fragments is actually, no pun intended, really is sort of a blending of certain fragmented works that I had developed separately with different things in mind, theological works, part nonfiction, part fiction. the book itself, I like to think of as sort of, at heart, it's definitely, it takes the form of a novel, a loose literary novel, but, at its core, it's really trying to convey certain, substantive arguments for the existence of God, exploration of topics like, the problem of human suffering. And so there's a lot of, I guess, heavy theological exploration in there, but it's presented in a way that I think is a little bit unique, a little bit novel compared to, a dusty textbook. And I mean, part of the reason for that was, firstly, I enjoyed writing it. And I'm a literary guy. I just was having fun with it, but partially to maybe attract an audience that wouldn't ordinarily pick it up and read about a topic like that. There's a little bit of a experimental writing in there. It's a little bit esoteric. It's not completely straightforward. But at the end of the day, I think its main aim is to challenge the reader intellectually, and it's in keeping with my idea that we should never stop growing in our faith, asking ourselves the tough questions, and it's reassuring to know that a veritable tradition going back to the very beginning of the church itself has been working on really good answers to these really tough questions, and so it's always reassuring to know that as much as there are tough questions and, the nuns that Anne was talking about earlier, perhaps might have, certain pretty heavy objections that they might make to, a belief in God, that there's just as compelling answers, to meet those objections. And that again, it just ties back to where I felt myself being called, to lend my voice to this ongoing conversation and come up with some answers of my own. So that's basically what, the book tries to lay out.
Yeah, and you do a good job because you said it best that you ask these questions that a lot of people maybe haven't really asked themselves about the meaning of life, right? And about why we're here and what's really important and God, right? And even the whole concept of God and why we should ponder him and be grateful to him and live for him. So I'm sure that you and all that you do with your daily work as an attorney and also as a husband and a father, I'm sure that you are feeling God close by. All of us go through times where we struggle with God being with us, but I just get this feeling that in all that you're doing, that you are being guided by the Holy Spirit and you do feel his presence.
Definitely. And it's not always, it's a challenge for people that are busy and people that are raising families and have demanding professions. It's a challenge to always remember that even in the small moments, we are, in the presence of, of the Holy Spirit. And I think it's just important. It's the kind of thing that it's a challenge, but that's what we really should be trying to get ourselves to always remember, that we are in the presence of God. One of my very early sources of inspiration was my grandmother, and I didn't have a mature relationship with her because unfortunately she passed away well before her time of illness. But when I was growing up, my grandmother was basically regarded in our community as a local saint. I mean, she was basically, she was steeped in work for the local poor. She, at a time when, most parishes, they didn't have what we call today a parish outreach organization, in the 60s and 70s, she basically started from scratch in our parish, which remains my home parish today, the parish outreach organization, which to my knowledge, every parish or almost every parish on Long Island today, which is where I'm from, now has one of these, collecting food, toy drives during Christmas, turkey drives during Thanksgiving, regular food donations, food pantry, whatever. She sort of was in the trenches and was the originator of this vital work, and she was rightly regarded by a lot of people as very saintly. I looked at her, I looked at my mother, other great influences, actually, people that I knew well, And I realized that, we can pursue sainthood, we can pursue God's will, even after a long day at work, even with, she had 6 children to have to, make dinner for and put to bed and all this stuff. It's a good lesson in sort of recognizing that there's no hour of the day, there's no day of the week when we're not in the presence of the Holy Spirit, when we don't have the opportunity to do God's work, even in the most ordinary moment, even in a moment when, it seems like we're sort of buried in everything else life has thrown at us. So, that's sort of where I come from in terms of sanctifying the ordinary.
That's so great, Peter. And I love how the role models in your life are important and they're venerated, right? I mean, like that is a veneration, that you're able to venerate your grandmother and say, all right, now it's also my turn to now follow in those footsteps, right? Isn't that part of the Christian faith? Is it's a giant relay race. It's a giant relay race. We should we're receiving what we've been given from saints that have gone before us, and we're expected to pass the baton to those of course our own children and all of that, but also those around us in our community. And yeah, what a great witness your grandmother had in your life, because and in the community, because that's a great thing to just take a look at for people in their lives. Maybe you're out there right now struggling to see the existence of God, to see that where is God in society with all this unrest and everything. Well, you know what? Look in your family lineage, and see who is doing good. It's like that Mr. Rogers thing, right? Always look for the helpers.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I love that, Bill. Thank you for bringing that up. I have to say, first of all, Peter, I love what you just told us, because you didn't share that on the first show. So that's something new that I didn't know about. And my mind went to, and Bill, I'm going to refer to you, is that Bill's grandmother was also very close to him. And she just passed away this past year during COVID. And
I'm sorry.
And I have to, that my mind goes there. And in addition, now you have me, who honestly, my grandmother was so important to me. Honestly, she was probably one of my best friends. She died when I was 28. And yes, I would say she has affected my faith, because she went through so much in her life with 2 children that died. She had 4 children and 2 died at a young age. And she was such a wonderful grandmother to me, at being her first grandchild, of course, too. So I think that we make a shout out to the people that are listening that are grandparents. Grandparents make a difference. They really do. They're so important to our faith. And so no matter where you are in your life, because we get listeners of all ages, just remember that a grandparent can make or break the difference in someone's faith. So I just want to thank you, Peter, and also Bill, that you shared with me before your story of your own grandmother. And thank you, Peter. Thank you for enlightening us about that, because I do feel that the prayers of your grandmother are probably definitely still with you.
Well, thank you for that. And I mean, look, it's no surprise. I like Bill's analogy of the relay race. I mean, it is good to feel connected to, in an unbroken chain, really. The very first apostles, and there's sort of this succession of, striving for Jesus, and it sounds like we're all very blessed to have, what I was saying at the outset of our conversation, a good faith, a fortifying faith presence in our early upbringing in our family. It underscores why family is so important, to carrying on the faith and so forth. And I guess another thing I would say that kind of hits off this theme is that, and I repeat this a lot to people if I'm trying to inspire someone, I believe it firmly, is that every day we are called to sainthood. We have to strive for sainthood every day, and we don't know the hour or the minute that could be what earns us our sainthood. Every day has opportunities to strive and achieve sainthood, and obviously, in dramatic moments, that could be martyrdom, which God forbid. We in the 21st century have to face that, but for 99.9% of us, that sainthood is going to be won in moments of ordinariness. It's going to be won in a moment where your child is crying and you have to get dinner on the table, and you both have hectic things at work, and you've got the laundry and you've got to take out the garbage, and what your attitude is to that situation, what your attitude is to a stressful work situation where people are upset or people are afraid, how you comfort people around you. These are the ordinary moments where in all likelihood our own sainthood will be achieved. So every day is a chance to strive to sainthood. We're all called to be saints.
Oh, amen. Absolutely. And thank you. As we're headed into Lent, it's Ash Wednesday's coming up. It's a good reflection for all of us that, we have a purpose for God. And Peter, I'm so happy that at your younger age, that you have gotten that awareness and you have such a mission with your own vocation. You mentioned family, and you mentioned how that's the first place that we evangelize. Now you're married with a young son. So what is it like for you? Because you're beginning that journey in your family life. We'd love to hear about you and your wife and your young, beautiful son.
Sure. We're still making up as we go along, but we definitely, we knew for a while that we had to have some kind of plan in terms of, raising our son in a Christian, explicitly, overtly Christian Catholic environment. We want to, I think we want to create an atmosphere that sort of from all directions, in all ways and contexts, reverberates God. And so, we have sort of a comprehensive way of doing that. I mean, we have imagery throughout the house so that, there's visually, a presence of our faith, which, as our baby gets older, could spur conversations. Who is that? What is this scene depicting? What's the significance of this? And that could be a point of connectivity. Then we have a musical component. We have in terms of the music that we'll sometimes play, whether if we're in the car or if we're in the kitchen. We have a playlist that we call the prayerful playlist, which we have a lot of good liturgical songs and other faith-based songs that we like, which lyrically I think also enhance the message. And then in terms of routine, I think it's important to have a prayer routine no matter what stage in life you're at, but especially with children, integrating them into a prayer routine. That's something that we make sure to do. And then another component, which is, I think, the trickiest of them, and it's one that we, have to work on, is, I think, the spontaneous embrace of faith and of, invocation of God, in outside the moments of planned prayer, the nightly prayer or a prayer before a meal, outside of, Mass, just having a spontaneous, whether it be a discussion when the baby gets older, or even when he's a younger kid, just sort of spontaneously, I think, even just weaving in small things, like if you hear that a neighbor is sick, we'll pray for him, that kind of thing. You just building toward this environment where sort of in its totality, God is put at the forefront. I think that's what we're aiming for.
Yeah, I love the fact that you have a family mission, and you have it at a young age with your son. And so your son will probably never have a time in his life where he didn't remember something about his faith. He will probably have remembrances of faith from an extremely early age, if I'm correct.
Yeah. I hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's just incredible. Now, I wondered if you could talk a little bit about, going back to the fact that some people in your age group are not people of faith. Have you ever had instances where you were able to evangelize people just through your life? And I'm sure the answer is yes, but we'd love to hear more.
Definitely. And, I'll qualify it by saying, and this goes back to my idea of graduated evangelism in terms of, what is my relationship with the person, and to what extent is there an opening for me to either bring God explicitly, expressly, or indirectly, implicitly into that relationship. There's definitely lots of opportunities where simply by trying to exhibit Christian virtue, I think I've kind of given people an opportunity to, I guess, reflect and sort of you say, hey, maybe I want to emulate that, or I appreciate that. But I think that it's the context where when you have mentorship opportunities, for example, or opportunities where if you're in, and I've had instances in the past where I've had groups of friends that are sort of a little bit more open and overt about talking about issues of faith, where you can really dig into some meatier topics when it comes to soul searching and growing in faith. And not everybody has the same ideas, not everybody's from the same religious tradition or even has a faith, but if you can get an openness about talking about it, and it doesn't have to be all the time. I mean, these friendships are usually revolve around video games and sports, but in terms of having the opportunities when they are presented and being ready when that comes to capitalize on those moments. If anything, the fact that it's sort of a not everyday occurrence makes it even more potent, because it goes to show that our relationship is very wide ranging and very deep. And one of the many things that we can bond over and talk about is issues of faith, and in those moments, we can have some very deep conversations where I think people have gotten closer to the Lord, certainly.
Yeah, awesome. And I'm sure that in your work too, as an attorney, because you're helping people, aren't you? I mean, you're helping people with issues, with problems, things that need to be solved, whether they're business or personal. And God enters in there too. And we're in a world right now where, it's not very friendly to religion and faith, is it? I mean, people are scared off from, that you're a religious person, and they hear that and think, oh no. And I'm laughing, but I'm not really laughing, but you know what I'm saying? I wondered if you had anything to say about that, because day in and day out, you're working too, and you're coming into contact with people who sometimes might not have the best feeling about people who are celebrating some kind of religion, whether it's Catholic or something else.
Well, just to comment on that, one of the great things is if you like history like I do, we've got a great church for that, because we've got very good history and it goes back a long time, and there's a lot of great, if you like Roman history, if you like medieval history, well, that's bound up with church history. So if you read about the one, you're reading about the other. There's a lot of great history. And I also love, as Ann knows from our prior conversation, I'm a big fan of the saints, and I like to read about the saints, study the saints. But, one of the things I've drawn a lot of comfort from in recent times, because of, the phenomenon that Ann was describing, hostility toward faith, the tumultuous nature of our society these days on all fronts. One of the things that I draw supreme comfort from is the fact that everything is relative. And if we actually think back at the inception of our church, and when it started to first come into maturity, I'm thinking about, the 400s AD, when St. Augustine, one of those great church fathers, was active in writing and was really forming a lot of the ideas that to this day are seminal to our, Catholic Church. That was an incredibly fragmented and stressful and unstable time. I mean, this is the fall of the Roman Empire. Right. There's barbarian hordes coming in, and the very edifice of society was crumbling. Political instability and violence and so no matter how bad it may be today, it doesn't hold a candle to this formative time. And yet St. Augustine teaches us that, and this is an idea called political Augustinianism, you might say. It's this idea that no matter what the temporal order looks like around you, no matter what the situation is, even if everything is going crazy, crumbling, tumbling down, it's still possible to have a completely fruitful and nourishing relationship with God individually and within your faith community. And God will pull you through no matter what how dramatic, how catastrophic, cataclysmic, the surrounding situation might be. And so I would encourage all who are distraught by, the recent times, of anything going on, to just look back at our church history, look back especially to St. Augustine, and look at the sort of encouragement that he would give us all.
It certainly gives us hope, Peter, doesn't it, for the future?
Yeah.
Knowing that God, can pull us through anything. There's no corner of the earth, there's no sin too deep that God cannot penetrate with his light. And it's, one of those things where I think a lot of people have doubts these days that, but God's power hasn't changed. From the moment, of human existence to now, God hasn't changed his level of power at all, right? He still is completely omnipotent. He is all powerful, all knowing. Like, these things continue, and he doesn't get any more glory. He doesn't get any more strength based on our current situation of whether we are faithful or unfaithful. Our actions don't give him his glory. We're called to worship him, we're called to know him, we're called to serve him, and we're missing out on incredible graces when we don't. But man, we are called to recognize that God hasn't changed or increased or decreased in his power from the moment of human existence to now. And so I think your point is well taken, because I think what we need to do is then help people recognize that they can still have that relationship. Like you pointed out, that St. Augustine said, you can have this personal relationship with God, and regardless of what's going on around you. I mean, even some of the saints, right? There were saints that were, tortured to death, and regardless of what was happening to them, I think of St. Lawrence, right? who has that, whether it's true or not, it has that, tale that where he was, burned on a grill, and to die. And he turned to the executioner, was like, okay, I'm done on this side, flip me over. I mean, can you imagine, burning to death and saying that to the people executing you? I couldn't,
No, I couldn't either. And I heard that tale before too. But it just goes to show that, as Peter said, we have such a history and a wealth of knowledge and stories and saints and books that we can go to. And I know, Peter, you're such a lover of the saints. So we're coming toward the end of the show, but we'd love to hear some of your favorites.
The good thing about the saints is there's a saint for everything. There's a saint for every problem we may have. I really depends on what side of the bed I wake up on. Every day is a different saint. I look at our catalog of saints as sort of like almost a toolbox. If you're gonna fix a leak, you'll use one tool if you're going to nail some, wood. You'll use another tool if you're going to change a tire. You use another tool. The good thing is, for any problem we have, or for any bit of inspiration that we need, or any situation in life we find ourselves in, there's a saint for that, and that's great. I have always had a special connection with St. Thomas More as an attorney, and someone engaged in sort of public dialogue. The saint who is formative on my educational experience, I would say, is St. Thomas Aquinas, definitely. But St. Augustine is a great literary saint, also has really enriched my faith. But then, there's St. Francis, a great story, great call to service and call to sort of revolutionarily change your life, upon heeding God's call and being touched by the Holy Spirit. St. Ignatius Loyola, good story there as well. When I was teaching catechism, one of the things I would always do, which was a hit with the kids by all accounts, was we would do the Saint of the Week. I really think it's good. And by the way, a lot of these are the headline saints I'm talking about, ones that pretty much everyone's heard of. You can go into a dictionary of saints, almost any saint you pull out. I find new ones every day that I don't know, the tip of the iceberg. Almost every one of them has a great story, and a great little nugget of inspiration that you can draw from them. So it's sort of like something that would take a lifetime to get through, and I'm always learning new things.
Awesome.
Yeah, I will second that.
Yeah, for sure. Peter, I know as we're wrapping up, please tell people how they can, if they can get in touch with you, how they can get in touch with you. Of course, we want people to go out and buy a copy of your book, available on Amazon and I'm sure elsewhere. Fragments, a theological story. Very, very awesome stuff. But just tell people how people can get in touch with you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I really appreciate it. It's been a great conversation. Get in touch with me. I don't have as much of a social media presence at this time. As you know, I'm kind of busy with all this other stuff.
Exactly.
At some point I will get around to it, but at this point, contact Anne. She'll get in touch with me.
Yes,
Awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love what you're doing, Peter. I want you to come back on not only Sowing Hope, but Journeys in Faith again. And I think I've also talked to you about maybe doing something with the foundation that I represent, the St. Raymond Nonatus Foundation.
Sure.
Peter, thank you so much. I want to say hello to your wife and your son, your family and your friends. You're really a wonderful person who loves his faith. And I think God is smiling down upon you. And I have to say, I think your grandmother is too.
Well, thank you. Too kind, very kind. But thank you so much, Chad. And thank you for having me on tonight.
Of course, absolutely. And folks, we want to remind you that you can always go over to our website, which is very simply patchworkheart.org, to find out more about our program, and also Anne's website, annedesantis.com. But continue to, prepare your hearts and whatnot for Lent, and we'll be with you on Tuesday. Until then, keep beating to your Catholic heart and sowing hope into broken hearts.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Sowing Hope on Patchwork Heart Radio. For more information about this podcast and our ministries, visit our websites, patchworkheart.org and annedesantis.com. You can also follow and interact with us on Twitter at PWH Ministry or Anne DeSantis 2.